Welcome back to the channel. Once again, I'm Bobby, and this is my 1971 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme that I'm going to be rebuilding over the winter. It is November in the Northeast here, so it is pretty chilly outside. If you hear a noise going on in the background, that's just this super awesome garage heater. This thing is kicking out so much heat, I can't even tell you. It is making this much more tolerable to be out here. So like I said in my first video, this car I bought from the original owner. So the way you see it now, this is nowhere near how I bought it. And I'm going to go over some of the modifications that I've done to it in this video. So I'll start with the visual upgrades that I've done. So one of the first things that I did was wheels and tires. These are Oldsmobile SS1 wheels. These actually came off of a 1970 Oldsmobile 442 that was displayed in the shop at Fusick Automotive. They specialize in Oldsmobile reproduction parts. They're pretty cool guys. They actually have a lot of the casting, they bought the casting rights from GM so that way they can reproduce some of the really hard to find parts for these cars. So also you notice these wheels are black, but these were not black when I bought them. The car that I bought them off of was an orange color. It almost sort of looked like a Hugger orange off a Camaro. That obviously was not going to go with the green, so I repainted them black. And the guys at Fusick were nice enough to give me all of these nice little trim rings and some new chrome lug nuts and this big chrome trim wheel that goes around the edge of the wheel there. And then to go on the wheel, these are just some plain Jane BF Goodrich radial TAs. They're 215 70R14s. Same on all four corners. One of the other things I did, this is sort of a mechanical as well as visual upgrade, was the exhaust. So this had a single exhaust. It sort of exited underneath the bumper here. I've got these super awesome dual exhaust tips on here now. It is a true dual exhaust system. It is a 1 3/4 inch Hedman header with a 2.5 inch collector that goes through a 2.5 inch stainless steel exhaust system. Right around this area of the car, I have I've got a pair of 18 inch cherry bomb glass packs. So this car is really loud. Anybody that has seen this car driving will tell you that you can hear it coming from quite a distance away. It does sound pretty rowdy. So now let's open the hood. And I'll go over some of the mechanical stuff that I've done. I've done way more mechanical work to this car than I have the exterior. The main thing being the engine. So I said this is a 1971. This is actually the block out of a 1969 Oldsmobile. It's pretty much the same. All of the sizes, the bore spacing, deck height, stroke, all of that stuff is the same. So it's basically plug and play. Aside from that, I've had it hopped up a little bit. There's an Edelbrock RPM air intake. There is a Holley 670 Street Avenger carburetor. There's a comp, I think it's a 264 cam that's in it, so a little bit bigger than stock. I do have the headers like I said before. And there's also, I don't know if you can see it, but these are Oldsmobile number 6 heads. So in the Oldsmobile world, the small blocks all had a number on the cylinder head. The big blocks all had a letter on the cylinder head. There's not really good data on it, but supposedly the number 6 and number 7 heads were the ones to have if you had a hopped up Oldsmobile engine and you weren't gonna go aftermarket. If you wanted to keep it as Oldsmobile as possible, you got yourself some number 6 or some number 7 heads for your small block. Now the 71 motor that was in the car originally did have number 7 heads on it, but they were sort of too rough to salvage, and I had found a good deal on these number 6s, so I was like, hey, why not throw them on there? They've had some minor porting that's been done to them. They've got big block valves in them, so I think it's a 2.07 inch intake and a 1.62 exhaust. That is bigger than the stock valve size, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but The other cool thing about Oldsmobile motors is the only thing that's different between the small block 350 and the big block 455 is that all of the dimensions of the motor, except for the deck height, are the same. So one of the things that I could do in the future if I wanted to is I could actually put big block cylinder heads on this, which do flow a little better than the small block heads, but they drop the compression way down. One of the other things I did all the way back here is the differential. This is still the factory Type O GN 10 bolt. It's a little different than a Type C that would have come in a Chevy, or some of the ones that came in like a Buick or a Pontiac or a Cadillac from the same time period. I had an Eaton Positraction unit put in there, so it's a little more sporty. Now both wheels are gonna spin if I try to do a burnout or something like that. But I also changed the gear ratio. So from the factory, this would have had a 256 or a 276 gear in there, a highway gear meant for cruising. I had 373s put in. Part of that was to increase the acceleration of the car. You know, when you put a higher number gear in your car, you get a little bit better acceleration. A 256 or a 276, and that's not really meant for performance. When I was younger, I really wanted this to be more of a performance build rather than a cruise build. So 373s I thought were the way to go. So it really improved the acceleration, but it killed the top speed. And that's not really the goal for this car anymore. I'm not really looking for it to be high performance or really fast. I'm really just looking to cruise it. If the channel gets big enough someday, if I'm lucky enough to have that happen, I'll build something fast. But for this car, I really just want it to be able to cruise. So with the 256s or the 276s, whichever was in the car, I could do like 70 miles an hour and I would only be turning like 2,000, maybe 2,200 RPM. When I put the 373s in it, that's when I had to drop my speed down because I would only be able to do like 60 miles an hour and I'd be turning 2,800 RPM. And especially with how loud this car is, it almost got to be a hassle taking it on long trips because the exhaust would be so loud and I'd be so worried at how fast the engine was spinning, I'd worry that I was going to hurt the motor. So to counteract that, the last thing that I've done to the car, the most recent thing I've done, is the Turbo 350 was removed and we put in a 200R4. Now I know you're not going to be able to see it from this angle, but the 200R4 is a 4-speed automatic that GM made in the mid to late 80s. It was put in things like the Buick Grand National, the T-Types, the Monte Carlo SS's of that time period. Now the cool thing about that transmission is that, sort of like putting in a 69 350 for a 71 350, it's pretty much plug and play. It's one of the easiest automatic transmission swaps that you can do. It's basically the same dimensions as the Turbo 350. You don't even need to do any cutting to like the floor pan or anything like that. It's the same length, the same width. You don't have to cut the drive shaft. The only thing that you really need to change is where the cross member is underneath the car. So this car is drilled, and all GM cars from that time are drilled for the Turbo 350 as well as the Turbo 400 transmissions. So basically all we had to do is take out the old Turbo 350, move the cross member back about 6 inches, put in the 200R4, and bolt everything back up. So if you know anything about those transmissions, they're a little finicky when you install them. They've got something called a throttle valve. It's a little plunger that actuates when you press down on the gas pedal, and what it does is it changes the pressure within the transmission in order to make it shift gears. So when we installed this, I misread the directions. I thought that the guys who rebuilt the transmission sent it to us all ready to go. All we had to do was hook everything up and drive away. That was the fatal error for this car. So if that's not set up correctly when you install it in the car, basically it's a ticking time bomb, and that's exactly what happened. I drove it for a little bit. I didn't know that it wasn't set up correctly. I thought it was just shifting a little funny, so I added a little more transmission fluid. That didn't really fix anything. I was going back and forth with the guys who rebuilt it. Nothing was really changing, and all of a sudden one day I lost 4th gear, I lost 3rd gear, and then boom, the car didn't want to go forward anymore. So a $200 tow later, here we are. We have a pretty solid setup here. I'm very fortunate to have some awesome family members that are going to let me use this garage. You'll see them a little later. They'll be helping me out with this build as well. But that's the main thing, really, is rebuilding the transmission and getting this car back on the road. That's the major thing that I want to accomplish. That's the one thing that's holding us back. And I know one thing is sort of really the one thing that's holding it back. Well, I have no experience building transmissions. I really have limited experience doing anything modification-wise to a car. So rebuilding the transmission is going to be very difficult. It's going to be sort of a trial by fire in terms of learning to work on a car, and it's going to be a difficult first project, but I have a step-by-step manual on how to do it from Haynes, about a Haynes instruction manual that's specific to GM automatic transmissions. So hopefully we'll be able to use that and start rebuilding. If you want to see what it's like to get into a project this big, or see what it's like to rebuild a transmission in your garage, hit subscribe. You'll get an update whenever I post a new video, and you'll be able to see the progress we're going to make over the winter. But for now, I'll see you next time where we're going to start tearing down.